Hello. How's it going? You guys having a good day? Wow, that's loud. Okay. Thank you. All right. Is that better? I don't want to burst any eardrums. That would suck. My name's David Simpson. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center, and I want to welcome you to our second faculty event of the night, second faculty event of the summer, as a matter of fact. These events take place Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every night, all the way through August. So if you're around here for more than the week, we encourage you to come by and visit us for these events. Tonight, we are very fortunate to hear from two of our faculty members, writer Carmen Maria Machado and visual artist Zehra Khan, who's back over there. Carmen will read from her book, and Zehra will give an artist talk, and then we'll do a joint Q&A afterwards. Before we begin, just a couple of things. Carmen's books and Zehra's books will be for sale at the back, so if you want to get, and they'll be signing their books, so if you want to get them to sign your books, you can do that after the event. There's also books and merchandise, really cool merchandise for sale at the back also, so take a look. The Hudson D. Walker Gallery will be open after the event if you want to check out the summer exhibition that's called Everyone We Know Is Here. It's curated by former fellow Heidi Hahn and contains work all former fellows at the Work Center. And I'd like to give a shout out to East End Books, our book partner who stocks and maintains our bookstore. They're just down Pearl Street on Commercial, very close, so it's worth a visit. The restrooms are still down the hall. And the sign-up sheet for student night is still on this table here. So if you haven't signed up, you have a job to do. And finally, please turn off your cell phones or silent so that we can have a great uninterrupted event. And now I'd like to invite to the stage one of last year's summer program assistants, the much loved and much missed Mandy Shabandi. She's going to introduce Carmen Maria Machado.
Hi, everyone. So, like David said, last summer I had the great honor and privilege of spending the summer at the Work Center as a summer program assistant. And that meant that all summer long, Sarah and David had the honor and privilege of listening to me bother them about Carmen Maria Machado. As in, hey, you know who would be a fantastic addition to our faculty for next summer? And now here she is, a tangible reminder that sometimes in order to get what you want, you have to bother the heck out of the people in charge. When I began my formal education in fiction 4 years ago, professors and older students and visiting writers had all sorts of advice to offer to the younger writers, but one that stuck was find someone you admire and write like them. It sounds simple, but it was something I really struggled with, to be honest. But when I first read Her Body and Other Parties under the table during my advanced fiction workshop in college, completely blowing off the class discussion in favor of stories that I found simultaneously horrifying, sexy, enchanting, and haunting, my own craft found a home in Carmen's work. It is so rare to find someone to look up to in the writing world who is doing not only exactly what you want to do, but is writing exactly the stories that you and the world need. As said by Metal Magazine, quote, "To step into the world of Carmen Maria Machado is to find the floor trembling at your feet, the world shifting on its axis into something intoxicatingly unrecognizable." And I can tell you for a fact that this is true. Carmen's work is weird in all the best senses of the word. It is heartbreaking, thunderous, and unafraid. It is like looking into the mirror at your reflection and watching it blink. To 19-year-old me, searching for a writer to emulate and begin building my understanding of story around, it was earth-shattering. And years later, my earth still shatters each time I revisit her story, The Husband Stitch, or return to certain parts of In the Dream House. Not everyone gets the chance to learn directly from someone they so look up to, who has been such an influence on their own creative journey. And so for this week, and for Carmen's invigorating and provoking class, I am so very grateful that I harassed Sarah and David about recruiting her for the summer program until they could finish my sentences about her. So, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce to you Carmen Maria Machado, the author of the best-selling memoir In the Dream House, the graphic novel The Low, Low Woods, and the short story collection Her Body and Other Parties, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. Her many other accolades include the Bard Fiction Prize, the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction and for LGBTQ nonfiction, the Shirley Jackson Award, and the National Book Critics Circle's John Leonard Prize. Her essays, fiction, and criticism have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Granta, Vogue, and many, many other publications. She holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and has been awarded fellowships and residencies from the Guggenheim Foundation, Yaddo, Hedgebrook, and the Millay Colony for the Arts. She is the former Abrams Artist in Residence at the University of Pennsylvania. Please join me in welcoming Carmen Maria Machado.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It is such an honor to be here. Oh, is this? Okay, great. Can you all hear me? Are we good? Okay, fantastic. So it is my honor and pleasure to read for you tonight. So I have this terrible problem where I need to read a full story in a reading. So whatever length I'm told to read, I have to fit the story to fit that slot exactly, because I hate leaving people hanging. I don't know why. It's something about that really bothers me. So I'm going to be reading a short story that I actually published several years ago in Tin House, but it's going to be in my new forthcoming book. And it's a short story. The forthcoming book is a linked collection, so all you really have to know about the collection is that the sort of organizing conceit of the book is that there's a comet that has appeared in the sky in all the stories which exist throughout history, but instead of the comet being like a reappearing celestial body, it has entered all of space-time simultaneously. So it's appearing for the first time at every moment in history. So every person in every story is experiencing the comet for the first time. And this story is called Blur. En route to visit my girlfriend in Indiana, I pull over at a rest stop in Illinois to wash my face. It is not my first mistake of the day, but it is the biggest. The bathroom is full of people. I see them before I place my glasses on the sink. I realize I'm flinching after my body is already tight with worry she will be enraged if I am late again. Children with juice-stained mouths are at sinks on either side of me. A middle-aged woman with a deflated handbag scolds them. They scream, she screams, all of it rising above the rush of the tap. The water smells vaguely sulfurous like the fountain of youth. I hear the rapid escalation and de-escalation of the hand dryers, and when the family evacuates the bathroom, it aches with the relief of emptiness. I press my hand to my forehead, my cheeks, my jaw. I breathe deeply. Face dripping over the sink, I reach for my glasses. My fingers scrabble over porcelain and close over nothing. I wipe the loose water from my skin and lean in toward my reflection, my nose nearly touching the mirror, pulled and bluish like a fish on the verge of floating. I continue to grope around for the glasses that are no longer there. I drop to my knees and feel nothing, not even the slapstick crunch of glass and wire beneath an unlucky hand. I run my hands along the wall. More tile, swinging door, a glass case covering a map of the state, vending machines, doors. I follow the sound of children's voices, the digital jangle of their video game. "Excuse me," I say, at a woman's shape. "Can I help you?" she asks. There is a game over chirp from the direction of the kids, a yelp of disappointment. "My glasses," I say. "I think one of your children took my glasses. They were on the sink, in the ladies." Her voice is flat. "They wouldn't do that." I have gone about this all wrong. I have accused when I should have asked for help. "Please help me," I say. "I can't see anything. Please just ask the children." "Good luck," she says in a clipped voice. "My guy keeps dying, Mom," one of them shrieks as the van door slams shut. I return to the Welcome Center. It's an overcast day, so the building is hard to distinguish from the sky. Solo 9's the name of the comet. Solo 9 is still overhead, but for the first time in ages, I can't see it. In the bathroom, I touch everything. I scoot over the tiles on my knees. I feel the crevices, trying not to think about it too hard. No spare pair, no contacts. She warned me not to be late, and not only am I going to be late, I am trapped along an interstate with no way to continue my journey. I could call her, tell her what happened, but the idea makes my stomach blossom with anxiety. Should I call the police? Is this a police matter? At least then the officer would explain the situation to her. She could not accuse the police of lying to her. She certainly wouldn't yell at them. Here is Officer Harris, I could tell her, and I will let him tell you about this comedy of errors. I sit against the wall and close my eyes. My floaters drift against my lids. The door opens. Someone comes in, pausing long enough to tell me that she's curious about me, but doesn't want to be rude. She leaves me for a stall and pees for a long time, hard and decisive, like a horse, or like she's been holding it for a long distance. She flushes, washes her hands at the sink farthest from me. Then, "Are you all right?" "This is very embarrassing," I tell her. "I've misplaced my glasses. I think they're here somewhere." "Oh," she says, "oh, you poor dear. Let me help you look. Where were they?" "On the edge of the sink," I say. She drifts like a peach phantom up and down the row, humming a song to herself. She does not pause anywhere, and before she talks, I know what she's going to say. "I'm so sorry," she says. "There's nothing here. I've gone to every sink." The heat on my face is tears, but I don't know it until she says, "Don't cry. Can I call somebody for you?" I imagine it, the call. The friendly woman handing me the phone. My girlfriend's voice on the end of the line, acidic with suspicion. "Who is that? Who's calling me? Who are you fucking? Where are you? I told you not to." No, I say. "I'm fine. Thank you for your help." She awkwardly touches my shoulder. I can hear the rustle of her leaning over, the dry hiss of a delicate chain striking the synthetic fabric of her blouse. She has the mushroomy smell of a bra removed after a long day. "I hope your afternoon gets better." "I believe it will. Do you pray?" "I think it will only get worse from here, to be honest," I say. "And no, I don't pray." "I'll pray for you," she says. "Better than a phone call, even." The door slams. Someone else will be along presently, I think. I dig in my pocket and locate a loose pill, small as punctuation. I take the Xanax. When I'm feeling calmer, I'll have someone call her for me. I take another Xanax. A man, preferably, though I will have to leave the bathroom for that to happen. I take a third Xanax. Outside the Welcome Center, I feel along the wall and sit on a bench. The sun has come out. The highway traffic sounds both calamitous and purposeful, as though everyone is escaping an apocalyptic event. I could be sitting here as a wall of fire creeps toward me, or a horde of zombies. Every time a large truck rumbles by, the bench shivers beneath my thighs. My phone is in my purse. My purse is in the car. I should just get my phone and call her and get it over with. I don't move. The traffic travels along the highway like a droning procession of insects, sunlight glinting off the vehicle's chassis. Then a single car breaks away, moving toward me like a gleaming thread fraying from a rope. Music throbs from the car before it crunches to a stop and the door opens. The footsteps suggest a long stride, and the figure moves past me in a beat of color. The owner of them does not angle toward the bathroom, but to the vending machines. There is a clink of coins, a metallic hum, the crinkle crash of a candy bar being dropped. The footsteps start up again and stop directly in front of me. The owner is tall and dressed in something blue and structured like a suit. "Hello," a voice says. A man's voice, I think. The best possible development. She would never accuse me of sleeping with a man. "Hello," I say. "You need help?" he says. "Yes," I say, "but how do you..." "You're sitting here looking at nothing," he says, "or everything, but probably nothing." "I've lost my glasses," I say. I've lost my glasses and I can't drive without them. My vision is very poor. The bench creaks a little as he sits down next to me. He presses something pillowy, but with a firm center, into my hand, and I bring it close to my face. A Milky Way midnight. I don't eat candy, I say. You should eat it anyway, he says. Someone walks towards us and goes into the bathroom. I should ask her about the glasses, I am thinking, even as she walks back out and gets to her car. When she pulls away, I sigh. Where were you going, he asks. To Indiana, I say, to visit my girlfriend. Have you called her to tell her you'll be delayed? I'm afraid, I admitted. Afraid of what? Of what she'll say? What will she say? Have a bite. She'll yell at me for being late, for losing my glasses. Evidence. Evidence of what? Of not loving her properly. The chocolate stings my throat. It is sweeter than anything I've eaten in years. I swallow without chewing well. There is the promise of a choke, but it passes, though the painful lump of nougat reminds me all the way down. You could walk to her, he suggests. Walk from here. Sure, that's proof you love her, if you come toward her on your hands and knees. You want me to walk on my hands and knees. It's just an expression, he says, but he doesn't sound like he means it. The man in blue takes my hand. His is soft and warm and a little damp, like he's just finished washing the dishes. We stand, and the wrapper drops from my fingers. We go down the sidewalk, past the dog walking patch and the picnic tables and the fragrant trash cans, past my car, which sits obediently where I left it. We drop off the sidewalk and onto the pavement. He walks me along the entrance ramp to the interstate. I don't think we're allowed to do this, I say. I think the police will stop us. He doesn't answer. From the strip of gray stretching out before me, I can tell he is guiding me down the shoulder. A car drives by with its window down, and I hear fluttering ribbons of sound, top 40, shredded by speed. The autumn trees that line the highway are backlit by the sun, bokeh bright and pixelated. The shadows are harder to read, murky, indistinct. The feathery tips of tall grasses scrape dryly against my jeans. We are walking in gravel before I remember that I left my phone behind, in my purse, in the car. I pull back a little, but his hand is firm, and we continue to move forward. This feels like a dream, and that I always go blind in dreams. I both know and don't know what's around me. I perceive it but can't see it precisely, sense it but could never describe it. Also, something always follows me as I make my way around the dreamscape, something stepping after me in the dark. Except no one is following me now. The man in the suit and I are walking into the future together. This will be a good story, I say, a good story to tell one day. If he agrees, he doesn't say. One recent morning, I woke up with something in my right eye, a tiny cluster of shapes that, after a millisecond's pause, followed the direction of my gaze. It looked, in turn, like the contents of a petri dish in a news special about Ebola, then like a tick scuttling out of reach of my peripheral vision. Before I made an appointment to do something about it, another one appeared in my opposite eye. I drove to my longtime doctor, certain I was on the cusp of losing my vision blotch by tiny blotch. Is it Solo 9, I asked him, sitting in his chair. Did I look at it too long? His office had a plastic model of an eye on the filing cabinet with the name of a prescription drug printed across the base. He lifted the eye to show me, running his fingers along the cord of nerves to swipe away a layer of dust. He demonstrated where the floaters lived and explained what they were, the shadows of tiny, desiccated strands of the eye's vitreous humor that clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck in a wide and lonely sea. You're a bit young to have them, he confessed, but the worse someone's vision is, the more likely they are to get them earlier in life. But they're inevitable, floaters. Everyone gets them eventually. So I can't do anything about them. I have to just think that I'm seeing bugs for the rest of my life. The Romans called them flying flies, he said, but in Latin, of course, whatever's Latin for flying flies. Isn't that funny? Flying flies, like there's any other kind. Anyway, at some point your brain will adjust to their presence and you will stop noticing them. But I could not. As I looked out into the bright day or stared into my computer screen, the shadows cast by the dead jelly of my eye continued to flit and make me think that insects were darting past me. I was constantly jerking my head to the side to avoid them, as if I were cowering before a raised hand. I'm thirsty, I tell the man in blue. We've been walking for what feels like hours, and I can no longer see the outline of the rest stop and the blur behind us. He sits down in the weeds and the wildflowers and draws me into his lap as if I were an infant and tilts the ridged mouth of a bottled water between my lips. I take long pulls, but never feel quite sated. In the air, I smell the faint burning of rubber, the hot grease of fast food, and a fresh, breezy core, nature persisting through everything mankind can throw at her. Someone tosses litter from a passing car, and whatever it is clatters down the embankment near us. I release the bottle, and it burbles and squeals. Sometimes, I say, startling myself, she grabs my arm. This sounds so minor, so I try to explain. There's no love behind that touch, and it's the worst thing. From the tree line, something yelps in pain, and then falls silent. Do you have a phone? I continue. She told me to call her if I was going to be delayed, but she also told me not to be delayed at all. I don't know if she'll remember which instruction is more pressing. Sometimes she tells me she hates me, that she's always hated me, and the next day says she's never said that. Is it possible to do terrible things and not remember? Do you think something is wrong with her? Do you think she's sick? In any case, I think we should call her. He doesn't say anything. I feel soothed by my pain for a few breaths. I feel soothed by my plan for a few breaths before a needle of anxiety plunges through my sternum. Even if he were to call, I'd have the same problem. Even though I've never been interested in men, not even a little, she could very well accuse me of cheating on her and changing sides. Betrayal squared. Never mind, I say. I press my face into his suit jacket, which smells like a campfire. He rocks me. The cars whiz by like bees. Once, in the city of her birth, before the arrival of Solo 9, but after the dream I'd had about it, my girlfriend became angry at my exhaustion and abandoned me at a carnival at dusk. I don't want you here. You should leave, she said, and disappeared into a crowd of people. I sat down on my suitcase and pulled out my phone, but there was no one to call. So I opened up my book and read by the flickering lights of a nearby ride, the Matterhorn, which tooted a vaguely Bavarian song as it swung screaming patrons in an elliptical orbit. As I strained to decipher the text, I was reminded that when I was a child, my doctor told me that my eyes were bad because I read so much beneath my blankets by the beam of a dying flashlight. I had cried because I loved to read, and I thought he was telling me to stop. She found me there, hunched over my unread pages. She was furious I hadn't come to find her. As I dragged my suitcase through the dust and watched the back of her head, I remembered his response. All I'm saying, he'd said, his voice rising above my tears, is that if you keep reading by dim light, your eyes will fail you, and there'll be no one to blame but yourself. I tried to listen. I really did. But there are some things you just can't help doing. Anything can happen on the road. That's what my dad always said. The reason he insisted on buying me a jack and lug nut multi-tool and a tiny red backpack full of army rations and a set of flashing battery-operated flat flares for emergencies. The man in blue laughs. Well, not laughs precisely, it's more of a chuckle. I didn't know anyone did that. I actually chuckled, but he does, and my head taps against his chest with every pulse of sound. It's as if I'm his heartbeat, and he's thinking about someone he loves. I don't know what'll happen if I keep following him. I do know what'll happen when I show up at her doorstep. My dad also used to say, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But what he didn't understand was that not knowing always leaves room for hope. We stand up and keep walking. With every step, something in my cardigan pocket knocks against my hip, and I draw out a tangle of keys. When I squeeze them, their teeth bite, like the devil I know. I lean back and hurl them into the tree line. I don't hear them land, but a pocket of birds bursts into the sky as though a bomb has gone off. The man in blue murmurs something low. What? I say. Have you heard the story, he said, of the woman who saw nothing? Ha, I say, is that my story? No, he says slowly, as if the joke is lost on him. Tell me the story of the woman who saw nothing, I say. There once was a woman who had the same nightmare every night, that a monster slept next to her, purring, burbling blood. The monster would sometimes wake and give her gifts, stars, pearls, the pith of tangerines, and she tucked them under her pillow. When she woke up, she went about her day, but every night she returned to sleep and thus to the monster's side. One night, she dreamt she handed the monster the eyes straight out of her own head. The monster put them in a jar. Every night after that, she arrived into her dream with new eyes and handed them over to join the others. Soon, the jar was full of them, round and unblinking as jawbreakers. And with her eyes so captured, like a selkie without her skin, the woman knew she had no way of leaving. Upon waking, she wondered why she'd given them over, but she never had an answer. It just always seemed to make sense. The candy bar lurches against the base of my esophagus. What did the monster look like? Oh, the monster was terrifying. It had claws as sharp as time and teeth filed to bony points. It had the eyes of an octopus and the head of a queen and the belly of a bear and an albatross where its heart should have been. When enraged, it would make this horrific, screaming sound that caused the house around them to tremble. And I can feel it then, the foundation shuddering beneath the monster, a shook, 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 like an earthquake. I can feel the heat of its breath. And, he said, everything would smell like metal and burned hair and fear. And yes, it does. It does smell that way. The pavement trembles underneath my feet. I gasp and pull, and his grip tightens. Let's go into the ditch, I say. Wait for it to pass. No, he says. His voice is calm. Stay right here. He guides my body until I'm standing at the edge of the shoulder. He leans into my hair and drops a whisper in my ear. Shh. The trembling grows more agitated. I whimper. You have to trust me, he says. I'm the only one that's here. You have to trust me. There's no one else to trust. Please let me go, I say. My ears pop from the force of the 18-wheeler that screams past us, blasting its horn. I smell the rank sweetness of manure and hay, and I know what's in the back of that truck, bristly, terrified pigs being carried to their deaths. The spray of gravel and dirt stings my face. I begin to weep. Stop, stop, he says. Sweet girl, don't cry. I can't help it, I say. But you can, he says. You can help it. You know you can. I told you to trust me. Why are you crying? Because I don't think I'll ever see the world right again. And I don't think the world will ever be right again. But glasses can be replaced. I will deliver you to your girlfriend, and she will deliver you home, he says. All will be right. I cannot imagine her driving me back, but I suddenly have an image of being bundled, sightless, onto a plane, of looking out a plane's window and seeing nothing but loose snarls of blue and white and brown. Will they tow my little car, I wonder? After a few days, will they take her away? Put her in a lot until she's deemed abandoned? Will she be shipped off to a more responsible owner? You never told me the end of the story, I say, as I kick off my shoes, of the girl who saw nothing. Oh, he says, yes, the girl and the monster got married. The end. Cold strains through my sweater. The light is getting gold and thin, as though we are drifting to the upper level of the atmosphere where Solo 9 waits for all of us, but especially for me. The sun is setting, I say, earlier and earlier these days. Yes, he says, but we need to keep going. Indiana's not coming to us. It has roots. You are the movable object. I tilt my head back and open my eyes as wide as they will go. Step to your right, he says. There's a deer. I tilt my head down, eyes watering, and see the shape of it. The broken body is massive, corkscrewed, utterly still. We dropped on the side of an embankment, and my face is level with its opened gut, the dark, unknowable silhouettes of its organs, the aluminum bite of blood, the rancid heat of organic matter turning. I hear the titter of flies. They flutter past my face like animated dust, and I cough. I love her, but she makes me afraid, I say. Maybe she loves you because she makes you afraid, he says. The buzzing fades. He rises up to the shoulder and brings me along with him. The pavement feels like damp cornstarch sand that lives beneath the tide, solid unless you stand on it for too long. I think about the miles in front of me. It feels impossible, and yet, isn't that love? An impossible thing, taken on inch by inch. It's sort of beautiful when you think about it, I say to him. Walking along the road to her, it's like a movie. We're gonna get to her and you can explain what happened. She's gonna be so happy that I'm there and she'll listen to you. I know it. Silence. A breeze strokes my open palm. I lift it to my face, cupping the bright chill of my cheekbone, and then turn back and forth along the empty highway. Somewhere in the distance, a car flips on its headlights, and then another, like street lamps going on at dusk. I keep walking as the light drains from the sky. Within minutes, the whole world has closed its eyes on me. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Carmen, for that beautiful reading. I'm here to introduce Zehra Khan. Zehra Khan's work can best be described as provocative, unconventional, and playful, and I can say the same about her sweaters. I really like her sweaters. In her words, she does what she can to give materials another life. Her work has taken her from Indonesia, New York, Paris, and Switzerland, where she discovered her ability to make art from the found and by subverting expectations within experimental opportunities. Through canvases ranging from bedsheets, photographs, and the human body, Zehra provides glimpses into the relationships forged between humans, the flora and fauna of our world. She has examined these concepts through residencies ranging from Key West, Vermont, Korea, and Nepal. She has been published within children's books, coloring books, and has been featured in exhibits Tiger Strikes Asteroid and Zehra Khan, Your Everyday Myths. And I'm very happy to introduce Zehra Khan.
Thank you so much for coming, and it's such a pleasure to go after Carmen. All right. I need my clicker. So, my name is Zehra, and to get to here, I thought I'd start kind of at the beginning. I was born in Indonesia. I lived in Paris for 7 years, Switzerland for 3, and then we moved to Massachusetts. This is Paris days. My father is from Pakistan. My mother is from Idaho. The cat is Vicious, and that's my sister. and they're important. So I'm going to go to when I started doing, kind of making unique choices in my artwork. I started drawing with words. The first one is in high school. The second one is first year of college, cut off the hair, got 2 earrings. This is probably at the end of college. Feeling a little moody and depressed. So, but I had a lot to say, and I didn't want people to necessarily read it. So I started writing in stream of consciousness. This is just a character from a magazine that I saw, but I was writing about him, and then I realized I should be writing about the people that I love or know. So I started experimenting with that and kind of engaging the space a little more. I wasn't showing these works to people. I found them they're like diary entries. I used to write a lot in my diary, and then I was kind of channeling them into something else. I probably drew it like I would draw a face, so I'd start with the eyes and then move out. But I really enjoyed the automatic writing. I feel like it was giving me a lot. Then I realized I could draw on people. As kids, I think we always write notes and doodle, and I really enjoyed that. And so I thought, could I do it in college? My friend here volunteered, and I drew on him with a ballpoint pen, which is not, archival. He took photographs with a Polaroid camera. It was very just experimental. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't show these works to anybody, but continued kind of playing with this concept of drawing on people. So as they got more elaborate, the angle of the photograph started to matter more. This face looks weird face on, but from an angle, much better. I did my MFA here at the Work Center. I graduated in 2007 with a program through the Mass College of Art. It was a low residency, it lasted for about 5 years, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to P-Town through it. And so this was my, when I arrived, angsty, I felt like I needed to find something that was more in line with me. So I started kind of looking at animals and going for humorous things. I was trying to explore the life of a 20-year-old, maybe. Drinking, smoking too much, flirting, tapping a keg up there. This guy's got 2 cigarettes in his hand. So it's not all me, but I was looking at the time. And I was drawing on these long scrolls because I wanted to work on the floor. And part of the challenge for me was to draw every animal, and then it was North American animals, so I was kind of giving myself these little assignments. But then I also wanted to disrupt the heck out of it. So this was called I Rub, and then I erased it and wrote love. I love you, I rub you. So while I was doing these big pieces, I was also taking informal shots, progress shots. So I just lay on top of this drawing of a big yak and made somebody take a picture of it. Didn't really... It's just part of the process of working big. I thought, I look great next to it. It's like, finally, I can ride my drawing. And this was when I started to realize I could paint on myself. So it's very, very light, very timid marks, but here was kind of a final presentation for the semester. And I was really getting into the patterning of these hair marks, the fur marks. And then I realized, well, I'm a fur creature too. So let's put it on me. So wanted to commit to that. But didn't really know where I was going with it. I didn't even know what this was. I was like, is it animal? Is it human? What's the point here? Is it tribal? Is it I don't know. It's messy, and it's acrylic paint. And I thought it was important that it's acrylic, like that I wanted to be part of the painting lineage, because that's what I was studying. So this is my rat phase. For years, I really loved the rat as the emblem of chaos and curiosity. Everybody has a great rat story in their life, and I've heard many, and I'd love to hear them later. So, here, very documentary style, just didn't know what I was doing, stuck my foot in there, who cares? Then I realized, oh man, that makes a big difference if I'm involved or not, if I show myself or not. So here, I'm exploring about the relationship here between me and the person, because I'm literally standing right over them. I love working with friends. I realized I wanted a more social practice, and so I would invite people to come in and play around with paint with me. And I would give them a certain time limit so I wasn't exhausting them beyond an hour or whatever it is. And here it's, rats behaving badly still. Oops, there we go. They're drinking, smoking, observing. Right, and I was looking at classical art and odalisques and subjugation of women and the gaze and how do we look at women. So I was like, all right, how do we? There we go, the classic. So up in Carmen's, this happened in Carmen's studio. I drew the rat rug. It's like a shag rug, the pulpy shag rug. And then the sexy rat man is on it. And he's got his fan to cool him off. And then so this was a friend, another painter, in the studio that I'm in right now, actually. And he agreed to do this very kindly, and I threw $1 at him on the floor for him to get so he would be paid. Part of the process. And I was really in love with these paper masks that are totally flat. They're made like oven mitts. They're just... So it only works from one angle. You look at it, it just looks like a shark fin from the wrong angle. But started getting bigger, realized I wanted to do paintings of the backgrounds. And then I was like, ooh, pop-outs. Let's get some pop-out pieces. And I was drawing my friends, my family, my loved ones. And just trying to, still drinking, right? Still thinking about drinking a lot. This piece is called Last Cigarette because I am smoking my last cigarette in this bottle. I'm not actually, but I was trying to get to that point. And I'm just gonna show, so was where I started, because the pieces were getting so big and involved, I needed to start taking test shots, because if I did it wrong, if I put on all this art, like all this time into doing my painting and it turns out wrong, I've kind of missed an opportunity here. So I started realizing that the test photographs were really useful. So here I am, I'm bouncing on a camping stool. I made some skin out of a bed sheet. The materials become very important. I love getting gifted materials. Somebody gave me this big drop cloth, and I painted it on my car. In a driveway right over there. So that's the final piece. So I realized I was going 3D. I was doing installations. They were kind of mini performances. I was filming, photographing them, but that was it. It wasn't live. It was just whoever saw me. And if they took pictures of me, I was like, oh my God, is that their art now? What's happening? But I really enjoyed that it was confusing, and that people were getting involved and playing in my studio. So this is a circus, a flea circus, flea costumes. I love making everything out of paper, so started collaborating with somebody named Tim Wynn, the flea. And I am the rat acrobat hanging off of the elephant. It's an elephant act. I did this at the Vermont Studio Center, and I got tons of people involved who volunteered, so I felt like I had to use them all. So I made a lot of costumes, about 30, and got everybody involved, as many people as possible. This was at Yaddo, where I met Joan Wickersham. Amazing time. And as the sets became bigger, we were doing more progressive films, filming small actions, and I realized that the ephemera that was created, the props, were becoming interesting to me. And I was making them out of recycled materials, recycled drawings, because if it's starting out with an old drawing, it's like it's already has all this energy put into it. So I was like, all right, instead of trash, let's change it. And I love kind of outdated technology. This is made out of exhibition postcards. And the reason why I was able to jump into 3D like this was because of hot glue. Hot glue is an instantaneous bond, as long as you're not burning yourself. And so I was able to create all these kind of three-dimensional shapes quickly without waiting there for the glue to dry or pinning it or, whatever it was. So developing more weird techniques. This was an installation. Oh, so at this point I moved to Provincetown after grad school and lived here for 10 years. And I thank Bob Bailey for that because he actually hired me here at the Work Center as a housekeeper. So he got me a job. And then I got introduced to Art Strand Gallery, which was just crammed with some of the most inspiring artists I've ever seen, including Paul Bowen and Bob Bailey and, many others. It was a fantastic place to be. And, so this is the story. We wanted to go nautical because it's a Provincetown piece. So we were looking at the whale migration. And so it's the last buffalo is riding in a red dinghy to warn the whales about the possible story, which the buffaloes experienced majorly in America. So, kind of looking at major American icons, but also like what's here and what's in Provincetown. What are the weird Provincetown stories we could start telling? This piece is called Anatomy and Architecture. It was at the Herring Cove Beach House before demolition. They took it over, did all this weird art stuff. So we did giraffes on wheels, so they could stick their heads out of the changing rooms that were open air. We wanted to make a piece very specific to this weird open air space. Broke up with the guy, that guy, and was depressed, and my mom took me to the New England Quilting Museum, which didn't, it's kind of like a small museum, but it blew me away, and I realized I'm surrounded by my great-grandma's quilts, my grandma's quilts, my mom's quilts, and I always have loved and admired that craft and the patience of all those stitches, and I thought that was not me. I would never have that patience. I understand that that's strange because I do this kind of obsessive mark making, but sewing? No. I was like, no thanks. But I loved the idea of being part of that history, so I started cutting up my drawings, my scraps, and putting them together in my new apartment as a single person. Whoops. This was the size of the floor, so that's the size and dimensions of the quilt. And it's done with hot glue. You can see my glue gun starts to appear heavily. Homework from childhood, scraps of paper, sacred things that I couldn't quite throw out. I mean, I do throw things out, I swear. But I love, if I can repaint on them or, give them a new life, cannibalize them, that word's got me in trouble. Too much Jeffrey Dahmer, I think. But I loved the crafting of it, so I started making my own quilts. They're also kind of like those pixelated marks. It's like this, I'm always coming back to small building blocks to become a bigger thing. I think because I am made out of small building blocks of Pakistan, Idaho, gay, straight, lots of little pieces to make the whole. And I think that's the word stuff too, was just I wanted to give you everything and then you kind of have to choose what you're reading. And that's the backside. So I realized, if they become objects, then I'm interested in them as being held and loved. So backside, very important. Bob Bailey allowed me to put a bed up in the gallery and take a picture of it, which I didn't have a clean enough gallery space to do this. So that was, a fantastic opportunity. And to think of it as a bed object, too, like climbing underneath it, keeping you warm, which it did not. This is the next quilt, which I called the Oh Shit quilt, because that was the first panel I did, and I realized, I can't do this all tiny little lettering. That's insane. So I left it as the rallying call for the quilt. And I decided to attach it only with staples. But then, like a couple years later, I was like, who is keeping track? Who is going to care that I only use staples? Not me, not anyone else. So I realized I was allowed to use glue. I was allowed to go back with paint, fix it, make it a little bit, structurally stronger, because the only one making that rule was me. Then I wanted to try a sewing one. The colors were so bananas that I decided to kind of bring it back together by cutting out these holes. It was the year that Trump said, grab him by the pussy. And so I was, trying to find a little bit, of like craft and home. And these are all autobiographical, scraps of cloth from my childhood, from my life, my sister's wedding veil, a T-shirt from my disco party from 1994, my first pair of sexy underwear. Sorry. Sorry, Mom. Yeah. So I'm still thinking very autobiographically, even though I'm exploring in these different little assignments, I suppose, that I give myself. The backside is, these are painted stitches on top of real stitches. Again, I had to realize the only one who cared about these rules was me. So I had to go back and fix the piece with paint and, not be scared of changing materials. Okay. That is the Provincetown rat quilt, and I called it that because it was, oh my God, right, all right. It's all my relationships in rat format. Yeah, so some went better than others. But yeah, I don't normally tell people that. This piece, I asked a friend to buy me a bed sheet to work on, and they bought me this horrible monstrosity with the roses and stuff. But then I thought, oh, well, okay, I gotta use it, gotta try. So I was kind of like, blending it in, and then the roses are still here. Sometimes I cross them out. Originally, I wrote all these little characters had words next to them, and then I realized, oh no, that's way too personal. Everyone's going to know way too much, so I drew over them. And it's all Sharpie, and I draw on both sides of the bed sheet at the same time, so that the ink seeps through differently and saturates it kind of heavily. This is cutting up my costumes that I made. I had a whole collection of costumes. What do I do with them? I'm gonna create a hide out of them, and the word says invisible if you can't read it. I don't want you to feel left out. Started reusing materials almost like props. So a bed sheet that was drawn on, now gets thrown into a film where I'm just kind of using it in the landscape. I've always been interested in like the pixelation of light. So this piece was called Drawing Indoor Light, and it was the first month of the pandemic, and I was asked to be part of a Zoom live performance. And so I hung up my bed sheets to make myself a little nest and painted the colors onto my body. Oh my God, and it was, the theme was deep healing, because, we were all going into crisis mode. And so I thought, what's more healing than Enya? So I put on Enya, and of course it's a Zoom thing, and it's the first time I'm using Zoom because I'm not a business person. And so at the end, Enya turns off, an ad starts blaring, I don't know how to turn it off. It was a very interesting experience for me. And I was looking at my reflection in the mirror to see what I was painting, or in the screen. So all this time I've been using hot glue, and I'm starting to get, I'm always trying to do things that are surprising me. So I wanted to I was like, what if, I never list hot glue as a material in my older works. If I was making an installation, I don't list hot glue. So I was like, what if it's just hot glue? So I kind of that tickles me pink. And I was still thinking of weavings and textiles, using the hot glue. Now I'm painting on plastic bits. I love space, outer space, so I'm always kind of thinking about constellations and atoms, and I feel like that work lent itself. Now it's kind of getting a little bit more Islamic geometry. And I loved that this is fake gold color. And I was like, ooh, it's gold. It's rich. I'm rich. So, I started really loving working with that. And this is the bronze color, painting on hot glue. Realized I could really start getting 3D. And I was still kind of thinking of chalices, the sacred elements, sacred emblems, candy. The only reason why I could put this candy in was because it was too gross to eat. So I don't want to throw it out. It's so pretty. They're like jewels. So I cut them across. The top section are just like, but I had to engineer it so that if the jewels dry, will they pop out just like jewels do of rings, So it's kind of, there's a lot of engineering ideas happening, especially with this dog. No, I'm just kidding. But it's still like the fascination of animals and surrealism and ridiculousness. The more I make it out of trash and the less I care about the more joy I put into the creation, I feel like it translates, even if I don't want it to. So I made 2 pigeons because there were pigeons cooing at us next to the studio and harassing us, and I thought it'd be funny to make some to put out as a reaction. Yeah, so that was the inspiration on that. A curator asked me to be part of a dog show, and this is their dog, and I love their dog so much that I wanted to make my own version. So I made him out of paper mache, but he's got a bottle armature, so I love efficiency and the fact that now this can store something. So he's got a little butt flap. And I said, could you put candy in him for the opening? And so they chose Tootsie Rolls, which I never would have done because that's way too close, But I loved that they did it. So I was like, sure, fine, let's, creep him out, let's go. Wrapped. Let's not, it's still the pandemic, kind of, right? So I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and what an honor, really, thank you.
Holy shit. Let's have another round of the hands. Okay, we're gonna do a Q&A because I know you guys are gonna have a lot of questions. This?
Hello?
There we go. Okay. Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah? Is it on?
Oh, okay.
So we're going to do a Q&A, but we have microphones and we're recording it, so we need to, even though like, oh, you can hear me, my voice is loud, we need to do it into the mics because, so, and Miracle has a mic, so if anybody has a question, oh, and Zehra has a mic. We have two mics, Mike's on either side. So, does anybody have a question for Zehra or Carmen?
So this is on. Anyway, that was fantastic, both of you. The thing that I realized that both of you have is you're in other worlds. You're not writers, you're not a sculptor, you're not an artist. Zehra showed you but a smattering of her work and has made films that are hilarious, strange, and out there, and lots of them. Has innumerable things made and then tossed, put in the sea, thrown away, things that move on their way. I was just very impressed with even the books you write. I'm so sorry. This is bad on my part. Carmen is that you do books. You do a lot more than just writing, and even that story that still is in me. There's a movie there. There's a film. There's something that's moving on, and I'm watching it, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I got to go home and watch the finale. So there's this thing that both of you all are completely involved with. Not what you do. It is everything. You have a much bigger take, and I just want you both to kind of expound on that in some way, that you're not just writers. Yes, you have the pedigrees, you have all the work behind you, but the world's a much bigger place for both of you. And it seems rather casual how you deal with it, which is really refreshing. Is there a question there?
Yeah, what is the...
I think I got you. I've always been trying to embrace the weird situations that come up. So I'm just prepared, or I try to prepare myself to be weird. Does that help a little?
I don't know if this is like fully answering the question, but I mean, I think for me, I have a sort of a vampiric quality to my practice, which is that I like to try new things and just sort of feast on whatever I sort of see and care to and take it on as my own. So I do practice, I've published a short story collection, I've published a memoir, a graphic novel. I actually just sold my first poem, which is like terrifying and very exciting. And I also am working on some television shows. And I mean, I'm kind of like all over the place in terms of my practice, and I feel like, it's kind of fun. I love the challenge of I guess it's like the equivalent of like working with new materials, where I'm like, oh, I could probably do that, right? Like I'm gonna try that and see what happens. And sometimes it doesn't always succeed, but often it does. And it's always really fun to get to see like how my brain gets to like fit into some other form. So I don't know. Yeah, I feel it's to me like the most exciting part of it, which is like not even what I've already done, but like, and the fun thing is that the more you do, the more people are like, oh, do you want to try this? I mean, I literally wrote the graphic novel because DC Comics said, we're huge fans. Would you want to write a horror comic? And I was like, I've never written a comic in my life. And they're like, no problem. It's fine. We'll show you. And I was like, okay, sure. And I feel like that's really like, right, like that kind of willingness to sort of do whatever or try something new or seize upon it is like such a pleasure. So.
Any other questions?
Okay, I can do it first. Oh, hi. One of my favorite things about both of your work is that you both find a lot of joy and humor in really dark shit. But it feels a lot less like a defense mechanism and a lot more like just kind of embracing the totality of things. And I guess I'm wondering if that has been a cognizant practice for either of you, or if it's something that came more naturally.
It was a cognizant practice for me. I had to fight being an angsty teen. You know, I was trying to figure out how to say something without being cliche or boring myself, which is probably why I didn't identify it as art for so long. It was like diary writing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about me is that I'm a deeply anxious adult. I'm like the most nervous, stressed out person you've ever met in your entire life. And I was like that as a child as well. And yet I would compulsively read horror novels and watch horror movies and do all sorts of things that my mother would find me, and I'd be like hysterical and up all night. My mother would be like, would find like a Goosebumps novel, like pornography, like stashed under my bed. And she'd be like, what is this? Like, who gave this to you? Where'd you get this from? And she would take it away, and I would ultimately find it again somewhere else. I'd go to some different library or some different friend who had it, you know, and I was always really drawn toward the thing that frightened me. And I think that, like, this is, like, the contradiction of my personality, which is that I am, like, in some ways, like, very drawn to that darkness and very drawn to... I think that, you know, the thing about just art in general, which is like a lot of times you're like taking someone's face and you're like turning it and you're like, do you see what I see? Like, do you see the thing that's frightening me, or the thing that is, I can't shake it? And I think that, you know, it is like this simultaneous way of like existing in the world as like a frightened person, which I do identify as a frightened person, and also trying to be fearless and trying to push into the discomfort and into the thing that is so scary. And it's like the only way I know how to exist in the world. Like, I honestly don't know if I could do it any other way. I think I would just be under a rock all the time. But yeah.
Hi, this question is for Zehra. So for those of us who are also deeply anxious adults, and for whom it sort of closes in our brains and our thinking, I've learned how to sort of bypass that in writing, and my background is in the visual arts, and I did not learn how to. For those of us who aren't in your workshop, how do you encourage your students to play
expand
and
into that scary space?
Exactly.
Well, part of the reason why I started chasing the scary space was because it got reactions. People, like, there's that energy, the unknowing, the uncomfortable. I think it's like just like a little bit of a thorn in your side, and I'm very interested in what makes people tick, and what makes. I mean, I'm figuring out what makes me tick, and so I'm really just trying to pick at that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. What a great evening. I wonder, Carmen, if you could talk a little bit about your process of writing this story, because one of the things that I love so much about it were the unexpected turns that it took. It's so beautiful that way and so evocative, and I'm just wondering what your process is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, every story is different. In terms of this story, so a thing about me, the reason I chose this story for tonight is because today in my class, we were talking about fear. I was talking about some of my own fears, and I talked about how I have a very deep anxiety around sight because I am extremely deeply nearsighted. The stuff about eyes and that story it's all pure me. It's like I have a lot of anxiety about not being able to see, losing my glasses. In college, I was occasionally would knock my glasses off my desk, and my roommate would have to help me find them because I was so blind without them that I literally could not see well enough to find them, which was like a very anxiety-inducing state. And so I have a lot of stuff around eyes and sight and eyesight and stuff like that. And then the story actually has, I think, an emotional root in one of my favorite short stories, which is Shirley Jackson's The Tooth, which is this really tremendous short story. It's in The Lottery, the book The Lottery, which is where obviously The Lottery, with a very famous story of hers, exists. And it's a story about a woman who lives in upstate New York with her fairly useless husband, and she has a terrible abscess tooth, and to get it repaired, he's sending her into the city via bus. So she's really doped up on painkillers. She's being loaded onto this bus. She's still trying to parent her husband and her children. She's like, I put food in the fridge, and he's like, don't worry, we'll be fine. But like clearly they're not going to be fine. And then she's on this bus, and so in this book, in the entire book, The Lottery, the actual title of that book was The Lottery or the Adventures of James Harris. And James Harris is this figure that appears in many of the stories as a man. So I reference like Officer Harris, and he's also described as a man in a blue suit. And he's this sort of trickster figure, this kind of odd, sort of unsettling, he sort of appears throughout the stories. And in The Tooth, she's like kind of on this bus, and she's like kind of fucked up. And then there's like a man who sits down next to her, and he's talking to her, and she's kind of like listening to him, but she's kind of messed up. And they stop at a diner to eat, and then she's like kind of eating, but she can't really, and she's taking more pills, and then they're on the bus again, and then he's still talking to her. And it's this very like eerie sort of story. And then she goes to the dentist in New York City, and when the tooth is taken out of her head, she loses all sense of self. So the tooth is removed, and she never uses her name ever again in the story. And there's a scene where she goes to the bathroom, and she's washing her face, and she lifts up and looks in the mirror, and she can't tell which, and there's all the other women in the bathroom, and she can't tell which face is her own. And she's like, I hope I'm not that woman. She's got like she looks very ill. And then she like touches her face. She's like, oh no, that is me. And then at the end of the story, she basically kind of loses herself and walks into the streets, but she imagines that it's like the desert. And then James Harris comes and takes her hand and like walks her into the streets. So it's an incredibly upsetting and disturbing story. And I think I was thinking a lot about the way that story is about the way we vacate the self, you know. And obviously in this story, there's this sort of toxic or unhealthy relationship this woman is in, and she is sort of in denial about it, but is obviously terrified to even fuck up slightly, you know, even in the way that is absolutely not her fault. And this terrible thing happens to her where she like loses them and she cannot continue. And her only choice is to trust this man who is literally leading her down the side of the highway, right? And ultimately abandons her at the end, if he was ever there to begin with, right? And she's just alone on the side of the road. And so with no phone or anything. So I feel like there was something about the structure of that story that really spoke to me, and that sense of just absolute, like, what happens when you have just like lost all sense of who you are. And that something about in your body has like been taken away from you, and you suddenly don't even know like who you are. And then and I wanted to write about the comet. I've also, another thing that happens is a lot of my stories are like worst case what if scenarios, because I'm a catastrophizer. And so I have also had the thought, being at a rest stop, taking my glasses off, being like, wow, it would really suck if my glasses went missing all of a sudden. I would be completely stuck here. I don't know what I would do. And so I think it also was like, what if that happened? So it was sort of this mix of that source text and then thinking about this figure, this like mysterious man, and then also the relationship, which I was also writing a lot about at the time. And then just ultimately there's like the horrifying what if, which also a lot of my stories are like a what if scenario gone straight to hell. It's like, you know, what if that happened, but it's like the worst case possible.
Question for Carmen. How do you protect and honor your own emotional well-being while writing about topics that are like deeply traumatic, and that could be like in your fiction or your nonfiction?
That's such a great question, and I do it so poorly. I mean, the fact of the matter is that like people ask me this question a lot, and the answer is always, well, don't do what I do, which is like sell a book before you're ready to write it, go off into the woods away from your partner and your support system, stop going to therapy, and write a book about the worst thing that ever happened to you over 6 months. Don't do that. That way only lies chaos. But in all seriousness, I think that, you know, like writing work that is about trauma or is about like a thing that has happened to you, I think you have to be like, and I say this, I mean, I'm here teaching a fiction class, but, I'm talking about haunted houses. But I think when I teach nonfiction classes, I often will talk about, you have to really have a super honest conversation with yourself about the distance that you have from the thing that has that you want to write about. And like, are you realistically in a place where writing would be either not just helpful personally, because obviously writing, as a therapeutic tool can be useful at any stage, but I think thinking about writing I want to write like an interesting book that other people will read. Like I want to write a thing for other people to consume. And I think you have to be incredibly honest with yourself, but like, am I ready to do this? Like, am I in a place? Do I have the right kind of distance? And the fact is like, I did it ultimately, but it almost destroyed me in the process, And I think that like, yeah, like did I do that properly? Well, probably not, but it's done. So, but yeah, I think, you have to be jealously guard your mental health. You have to have your support systems in place, like the people around you, whether it's like a partner or friends or like whoever it is that loves you. And also like to let yourself take all the time you need. Because the other thing I did was I sold the book and it then had a deadline. And like, if I had said to my publisher, I'm having a mental breakdown, I can't finish this book, I'm sure they would have been like, it's fine. But then I also was like, we can delay the due date, but also I was like, I don't want to spend one more second with this book. I need to finish it. So I kind of like created the situation where I was like destined to be on the verge of falling apart, while doing it. And like, it was not a good choice. Like it was not good. But generally speaking, I think, just like being very honest with yourself and making sure your support systems are in place, that you take all the time you need. And just, I think that's what you should do, not what I did.
One or two more questions?
Zehra, you said that everyone has a rat story, and I'm sorry, but I really want to know what both of your rat stories are.
Oh, that's such a... That's interesting. Do you want to talk about your rat story?
Well, it's funny you say that, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like the most important rat stories now are other people's rat stories that they told me, because they're so amazing. So I'll tell you one that my friend Chris told me, which was he's in New York City, and he sees a woman who's beautifully dressed, waiting in the subway. And, the rats are amazing. They're scurrying across the lines. And a rat got hit by the train. And excuse me? Like, no. I don't even know if that's true, but what a story.
Now we can never unhear it.
I'm very sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Mine is much nicer. It's so funny because I certainly would not want a rat to like be, close to me in the streets, like definitely. But I actually had a childhood friend who had a pet rat, and he was incredibly smart and knew all these tricks, and we would give him little baths in the sink, and he would ride on her shoulder, and he was quite cute. So I know that bats have bad reputation, for good reason, but also they are very smart, and I really did love that. I would pet him. He was just like, I'd pet, his little, right between his little eyes, and he was just very sweet and incredibly smart. He knew he could like turn around, stand up, and he could do all kinds of things. He was like a very smart animal. So anyway, they will outlive us all. So, Very
different stories.
Yes. As different as they possibly could be, certainly.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
So this question is for Carmen. You said you recently sold your first poem. Congratulations. That's probably the hardest writing skill to monetize. I know. But I was wondering how you view your poetry writing versus prose. Is it storytelling or is it something different? Where does it come from?
Sure. So when I was in grad school a million years ago, the poets always seemed so relaxed. I was like, wow, they seem like really chill. And then when I was writing, I was like, man, you can write a poem in a day. No wonder they were so relaxed. Like, prose writers were like tearing their hair out, like trying to write all these words. I'm kidding, of course. Obviously, poetry is, it's its own challenges. But it was funny because when I was working on it last summer, the reason I got into it is because I was really struggling with my prose. And I was like, I need to accomplish something. Like, I used to be a very fast prose writer. Like, I would just tear through drafts really quickly. And like COVID, not just having COVID, though, actually that did too, but also just like quarantine, the trauma that really like slowed me down and like really altered the way that I worked in ways that I'm still trying to come to terms with and trying to understand. And I sold a book before COVID. This book, I'm still trying to finish this book that I sold like at this point 4 years ago, which is like, it's just I'm moving in a really different way. And so I wanted to do something where I had this sense of accomplishment, where I could like write a thing in an afternoon or like a day, and it would feel like this sort of contained, completed object. And I used to write poetry like in like high school and like middle school and childhood, but like I have not written a poem in like many, many years. And so it began with just me being like, I literally, the first one I wrote was, I was like, I don't know how to write a poem, but I can say this. And I just began to like try to talk to myself. And ultimately it became this like, they're not like narrative in the way I would have, I guess I don't really know what to expect, because I was like, I've never done this in my professional adult life as a professional writer. I've never like really tried to write poetry until last year. And so it became these just like, almost like snapshots, or it's like this way, and you know, often when I'm writing prose, I do a lot of like writing kind of outside of projects where I'll just have like an image will come to my mind, or like a line, and I keep those all in like a file on my computer. So like if it doesn't have a space, I'll just be like, oh, that image, I'll find some place for it in something. But then I feel like the poetry gave me a chance to like have that little kernel and then just like build on it right away until suddenly I had this like little object that I could hold that was like, you know, whatever, like less than a page usually. And it was really interesting. And also thinking a lot about like space on the page, which like is, I mean, I do a lot of formal work with my prose. So I do think about like space and structure and things like that already, but it was like applying that to these like much shorter pieces. And like, I literally, I have a friend who's a poet, and I texted them and I was like, how do you write a poem? And where do you break a line? How does that work? And they were like, oh, haha, okay. They had to call me and be like, wait, here's the situation, here's how you decide how to break a line. And I was like, okay, got it. So like, I feel like it was really just like this like in real time education on like, how do I figure out how to make this object work? And then of course, immediately I got very addicted to like forms where it's like, try doing like, you know, taking a line from this poem, or trying doing like, you know, the last word of like a certain poem, and like, you know, whatever. It was like just all these ways that I could sort of play. And I think it spoke to my like the speed I used to enjoy, where I get to like try a bunch of stuff all at once. And if it doesn't work, I just move on. And then like, you know, I have a couple of things I'm working on, then suddenly it's done, right? Or it's like, it feels like an object that I can hold in my hands. So in some ways that's different. In some ways, it's like almost trying to recapture that feeling I used to have with prose, which has been so hard sort of in the last couple of years. So, but it's been really fun. And I don't know. I mean, I also like for a while was like, I don't know if I'm even show this to anybody. It was just like a nice thing that I could do that just felt like achievable. But yeah, anyway, so it's been great. We'll see how many of them I actually write, but thank you.